Welcome back to AuthentiCity FM. I'm Corey Spiegel, joined as always with my friends and co-hosts Phil Corrali and Mike Sable. Our guest today holds several titles, including one as the director and presidential chair at a very distinct School of Public Affairs, which was recently ranked #1 in the nation for local government management by U.S. News and World Report. She leads 7 academic programs, 6 research centers, which serve more than 1,500 majors and thousands of students. Her research has been cited in academic journals more than 2,000 times. And like Phil, she was recently recognized as a Local Gov 250 champion by NAPA. If you're curious to hear how our guest today manages her status as both a Jayhawk and a Sun Devil, stick around. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome to AuthentiCity FM, Dr. Shannon Portillo. We are so excited for the opportunity to have you with us and join us on the podcast. As is tradition on the podcast, we usually like to ask our guest to share their origin story, and boy, do you have a fascinating one. So we will turn it over to you to tell our listeners how you got to join us here in the podcast and a little bit about your professional journey.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited for the conversation. When I tell my origin story, I like to go all the way back to undergrad. So I decided to go to the University of Kansas for undergrad, not because I was planning to be a Jayhawk my entire life, but because KU is 20 minutes away from where I grew up. And it was convenient, and they gave me a great scholarship offer. So I went and changed my major 4 times as an undergrad. I went with the full expectation that I would be a doctor, a lawyer, because those were things that my family would be proud of and professions I understood and I knew. When I was in undergrad, I had the opportunity to participate in the Dean Scholars Program, which prepared students of color for academic research careers. And I had the opportunity to get to know some faculty and started in a PhD program in American Studies after finishing undergrad. And in American Studies, I was studying Latino youth civic engagement and how it varied by immigrant generation. So the way my grandparents talk about civic engagement, very different than my parents, very different than me and my brother. One day, my little brother's roommate was actually doing a project for our local newspaper where he just highlighted random people in the community and happened to be highlighting me as kind of a Monday fluffy feature. And I got an email from someone named John Nalbandian, who I'd never heard of. And he emailed me and he said, read these articles. If you like them, we should talk. And they were articles about local government management and city management. And I read them and they were super interesting. And so I immediately emailed him back. I also Googled him and figured out that, oh, we have a public administration program at the University of Kansas. Who knew? And sat down with John and he said, we're starting a PhD program in public administration. You should come be one of our students. And it was a brand new PhD program in an incredibly storied public administration program. And I had the opportunity to work with John as a research assistant that connected me with an incredible community of local government practitioners and emerging scholars. I loved doing my PhD there. Went to George Mason University right after grad school as a faculty member there. Got the opportunity to go back to Kansas 5 years later. Thought that I would never leave. KU was home. It was a dream to be a tenured professor at my alma mater, my home institution. But when the opportunity came to come to Arizona State University, I was really excited. The charter of ASU really speaks to me. Our focus on inclusion and our focus on taking fundamental responsibility for the communities we serve is really important to me. And so I came to ASU 3.5 years ago. I have loved every minute, being able to continue to grow with the school and focus on engaging with practitioners and continuing to do a lot of research in this area.
So I have, a couple questions. So we had shared that Pam Davis, a fellow Sun Devil alum, has been on the podcast and is part of our ICMA board family. And I actually logged in the other day and looked at my transcript. And I had the distinct privilege of taking a class with Dr. Michael Crow in 2005 when he first came to ASU. And so, for those who maybe remember ASU's reputation as the fun and the sun school, I think Dr. Crow has changed that remarkably. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective what it's like to work with an institution and a leader who has literally taken one of the top 10 party schools and turned it into one of the top 10 research land grant institutions in our country. Like, what a transformation.
Yeah, it's amazing to talk with folks who have been at ASU in kind of a pre-Michael Crow world and then a post-Michael Crow world because there is a time divide that's stark, and he's had a very clear vision for the university. I have never been at a place where I've known what the charter of the university said, what our mission statement was. And at ASU, it is literally engraved in granite on every one of our campuses. It's something that gets mailed to us in physical hard mail copies from the president's office and emailed and discussed. And so he is a leader who is very focused on our values and our design aspirations as an institution. So he has a very clear vision of this is what we're meant to do. And what I appreciate is that it's really focused on saying we are a research university, we are a comprehensive research university, and that means that we have to take fundamental responsibility for the communities that we serve. So it's not distinguishing between the idea of research as something in an ivory tower that you do and you put to the side, and then practice and community engagement as something else. It's really weaving these things together. So it's a vision that I think is very different than how a lot of institutions operate, and I've really enjoyed being a part of it. We scale and we scale quickly, and so that's also a lot different than I've worked at 3 research universities now, and this one feels different both from the community engagement aspect, the scaling aspect, and then a real focus on access, which I really appreciate. So we're not just looking for the best and brightest to educate. We are really focused on saying, how do we meet people where they're at and get them the skills they need to be incredibly successful? I'm a little jealous that you got to take a class with him, though. I I get to read about his classes. I get to get all the complaints from students who can't get into his classes now. I love that even though he is president of the largest research university in the country, he's still in the classroom. He teaches every spring.
So I was telling Mike earlier today that it was a very humbling experience. I did not get a great grade, and I was completely out of my zone sitting next to pre-med. So it was, I'm guessing he still teaches something very similar, science, tech, and public policy. And so I'm surrounded by brilliant, brilliant people, of which I didn't feel like I fit. But to this day, I remember the entire first class lecture about cherry tomatoes. And 20 some years later, that story and everything he put into it about all of the different policy decisions that happened for this clamshell of cherry tomatoes to exist. Like, what an impression, because I still remember it clear as day.
Well, I think that's a story for another podcast, so we will dive into that. So, Shannon, we have not had the pleasure of we've never met except this little time virtually, but your reputation precedes you, as does the reputation of Arizona State. So, for local government practitioners, they probably saw Arizona State either as a party school or as a connection to the Alliance for Innovation. And one of the things that they always did was say, let's marry this academic research with the practitioner. And you've talked about engagement, you've talked about access. What are some of the things that you have to do in order to marry those two things? Like, what does that skill set look like that helps set ASU apart from other institutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that I think makes it work is not necessarily a secret playbook. It's really the simple aspect of saying, here are our values, and here's how we make those values work in real life. So I'm going to go back to the charter. Our charter says this is how we do it. That means that we have to make sure that we're saying who is on the team. And one thing that I love is that we have professors of practice who are there with us in faculty meet. We had our last faculty meeting of the semester today, and our professors of practice, one of whom, Jeff Tyne, who was a longtime city manager in Peoria, and now he's on our faculty running our Center for Local Government Innovation and Education. And he's in the faculty meeting alongside all of our researchers so that there is that ability to just have those conversations across kind of the research and practice world and then say, how do we make sure our students have the best opportunities available to them? And that means working with researchers and working in communities. So our fellows do work alongside us, but then also do rotations through city and county managers' offices as part of their fellowships.
So I'm such a well. First of all, Shannon, thank you for joining us again. Like Mike, this is our first meeting, though your name and reputation has preceded you, and I am a little awed to have this conversation with you as a lowly NIU MPA grad, where again that tie from a theory and into practice was such an integral part of my graduate school experience. And what I am finding in my now 25th year in practice is that I am eager to refresh myself on the theory again, because the practice is every day and relentless and somewhat disheartening. And the theory comes back and actually, I think, provides that grounding, that purpose, and I love this whole concept that you've been talking about relative to ASU and this fundamental responsibility, right? What are we responsible for? The success of our communities. That is our purpose. Um, how are you seeing that in younger students who are working their way through your programs? How are you seeing that kind of come to life with them? Are they leaning into the theory at all more, or the practice side? And how does that marriage seem to be working?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's really an either or with the theory and practice. I think that this has to be something that's combined. But what I will say that's different with students now is that there are more students than ever saying that they're interested in public service. We have more students than ever being interested in making a difference in their communities, but they're really focused not necessarily on a particular credential or a particular career path. They're really focused on public impact and saying that they want to do work that has meaning. So, one of the complicated things from an educational standpoint is that they don't necessarily know what path to take to create that meaning. Very few of my students think about careers. The icebreaker that I use at the start of every one of my classes, so now anyone who listens to this will be able to pre-prepare, but the icebreaker I always use is, what did you want to be when you were 5 and how did you end up here? Because no one grows up saying, I want to be a city manager, unless your family, you have a parent or a relative who is a city manager. Few of us, I didn't know what it was. Few of us know it's a realistic career path. At ASU, in the school that I serve in, we have almost a third first generation college students, 50% students of color, and almost a third veteran students. And so many of our students are coming from backgrounds where they may not know about the full array of public service career paths, but they want to make a difference in their communities. So part of this is saying, how do we translate the desire to make an impact into an academic credential and a career? So that's where I love being able to pay back what John Nalbandian did for me so many years ago, saying, okay, here's actually what you can do in local government. If you get bored in local government, it's your own fault. So many of my students come in saying, oh, I want to start a nonprofit. And we have a lot of nonprofits and they do amazing work, but many of them actually want to be the decision makers who can help shape their communities, but they don't really have the language to know how to access that. And so I think that's where kind of the theory and the educational piece can help them understand what an incredible career local government can be, how they can do that work of public service and public value and public impact. And we have the opportunity to help them find that. It's really exciting.
So let's pull at that thread a little bit. When I went through the MPA program there, I had already worked in local government. My best friend worked, so I worked in Goodyear. She worked in Avondale. We carpooled downtown. So when you have this kind of full arc of students now, how has the curriculum changed to kind of address the world? And then the second part of the question is, the university over the years has built this tremendous relationship with the communities in the valley. Phoenix is a very, very big place with a lot of very large city manager form of government cities. And what a great training ground. And so I'd love to hear kind of about how those arcs work together and how those partnerships with the cities got built.
Yeah, so I think those are two really distinct questions. So I'll tackle the first one first, thinking about our curriculum. Um, I truly believe that in order for local government to thrive, we have to have people from a ton of different disciplinary backgrounds from undergraduate programs. And I think that the way that we stay relevant and innovative in local government is to continue to expand who thinks about this career. So, one way we've done that is really focus on the undergraduate experience. So, we have two undergraduate majors within the school, but we also about 2.5 years ago started to really focus on the general education requirements for the university as a whole. So we have two undergraduate classes, PAF 112, Democracy and Public Service, and PF 160, Surviving the 21st Century. The Democracy and Public Service course focuses on the American institutions general education requirement. So that really says, how are we organized? K through 12 education these days across the United States, you can graduate from high school with about one semester of civics education. And that almost exclusively focuses on the federal level, three branches of government. How do you vote? We don't learn about how local governments are designed and organized, the difference between a strong mayor and a city manager form, what the difference is between a city and a county, and how that's vastly different across our 50 states. So, our Democracy and Public Service course is an opportunity to really help educate folks at the collegiate level across the university in all of these disciplines. Surviving the 21st Century is our Intro to Emergency Management, which really says, like, how do we work across jurisdictions? How do we have all these ideas come together? And it's a sustainability course because we have to really think about climate adaptation in a lot of these spaces. So that's an opportunity for us to reach majors all over and not necessarily saying you have to become one of our undergrad majors, but it opens their eyes to think about the MPA. So then what does that mean for the MPA curriculum? Because now we have people from a variety of majors. Some people are coming straight out of undergrad. Some people have been in careers for a long time and know how this works. I think it makes for the best classes when we have a mix of undergraduate students who are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, super idealistic and excited for it, and folks who have a lot of experience who could say, so sometimes this is how it actually works. Seeing those conversations happen in the classroom is better for everyone because then our practitioner friends get that dose of excitement and our undergraduate friends get to know, or straight out of undergraduate friends get to hear, here's some kind of real world pieces and have the network to help them get into some of those spaces that they may not have otherwise. Some of the practical ways that we handle that in the classroom is that we have world-class educators who can say we have a broad range of experiences. How do we have these great conversations? And we have some boot camps that we've developed. So we have a stats boot camp that says, okay, regardless of your undergraduate major, here's a stats boot camp that can help get you up to be ready for methods, and an American institutions boot camp to say, okay, maybe you didn't get exposure to how these things work, how government actually functions. Here's a quick boot camp that's a self-paced, asynchronous online so that we can say, here's a base level of knowledge for folks to come in. When it comes to those community partnerships, that's one thing that I love about ASU. You're right, we've had these really strong partnerships for a long time. We've really leaned into that in the past 4 years. So when I came in, we had the Marvin Andrews Fellowship that had 3 positions. The positions were largely funded through individual philanthropy and some donor partnerships. We decided to turbocharge that by really partnering directly with cities. And so now we have partnerships with cities all over the valley, with counties, both Maricopa County and Pinal County, to say, let's have kind of direct investment from folks who need to build these careers long term. And so cities are actually funding it rather than focusing on direct donor investment. That deepens our connections with the cities in counties throughout the valley, and makes it so that we can continue to grow and expand and offer these opportunities for students. So I'm deeply grateful for all of our partners. It doesn't mean we don't also rely on individual philanthropy, we do, but it means that that individual philanthropy can focus on getting our students to ACMA, to ICMA, making sure that they have professional development opportunities through NFBPA, through LGHN, so that they get the full range of how do you get mentored into this career and how do you make it sustainable?
I appreciate that answer because that's I'm a little bit envious because I live in Minnesota. We don't have that same connection to the University of Minnesota. They tend to focus on federal policy, and so it's fascinating to hear about this local connection. Can you, like, for our listeners, how has that sort of evolution happened? And so where you understand that linkage and that connection. And then the other part is, if you are a city manager around the country and you want to form a partnership or a relationship with your local institution, what are the things what advice would you give me or others in a similar boat that we don't have a strong connection? How do we make a strong connection to institutions of higher learning?
Yeah. So, three pieces. One, I love our local government connections, but I do just want to give a shout out because we just started a new accelerated federal career track. So we're also really focused on that career level, um, and focusing on the federal. We also have an Indigenous fellowship. So we're working on how do we make sure that we're preparing folks to work with tribal governments and intergovernment collaborations. And then we also have an elections administration fellowship. So really focusing in on elections, which are happening at the local level, and we're preparing folks to work in counties. But I think that we can make these partnerships across a lot of different areas of government, and we've been trying to focus on the local, county, state, tribal, and federal level in kind of building this out. I will also give a little plug to we're really fortunate to have Carrie Kent, who is a longtime, she's a ASU MPA alum, longtime assistant city manager in the city of Mesa. I like to play 1 degree of Carrie Kent. There is no 8 degrees of Carrie Kent. She knows absolutely everyone, and so that's been a big help. So, some of the personal connections are really important, but she is our director of local government fellowship programs, so it's really easy for her to be connected, a connection back to the practitioner world for us through the university. We are working on a process of trying to help other universities kind of demonstrate how we're doing this so that we can share. We're not trying to be alone in how we do these partnerships. But a big part of it is just taking the time to sit down with people and say, here's how we actually create meaningful experiences for students and why it's important to invest. One thing that I think has been really helpful in Arizona is that we're growing as a metro area, we're growing as a state. And so there's an obvious need to invest in the next generation for this career. Um, and one thing that's just structurally different, I come from the Midwest, and we have a lot of really amazing MPA programs. I came from the University of Kansas. They're great city managers in the area, but the entire population of Kansas is half the population of Maricopa County, but there are over 900 cities in the state of Kansas. There are 105 counties in the state of Kansas. There are 92 cities in the state of Arizona, and there are 15 counties. Every single city and county is professionally managed. All of the county managers can get around a conference room and meet once a month. And the city managers all know each other really well because we have a really strong state level ACMA organization. And so I think that there is more of a focus on how do we kind of build the career path within the state. So I don't want to say context doesn't matter here because we're really fortunate to be in Arizona, to be in a place that can pour into our students. And I think that this is something that academics have to understand what's happening in their career that their students are going to prepare for. And the best way to do that is to talk to people who are already there. But there aren't always easy mechanisms to do that.
So I do want to talk for just a moment, and I don't know that we have to dive too deep into this, but what you just said really just kind of blew my brain up from the standpoint of the difference in the structure in the state of Arizona for professional management. And I think about it in the context of Illinois. We have more units of local government than anyone by a long shot. And I got my start in a special district of which we have thousands. And to hear the 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 scale of and by that I mean it seems like a tiny small scale up against, Illinois' 101 counties, and I don't know how many cities, villages, and towns there are, but our entire existence in Illinois focuses on Chicago, which in many ways is completely the antithesis of what we talk about from the standpoint of public management and of um, professional governance. And so we struggle in this state as we think about how to tell stories about the value of professional local government management, because everybody just has that associative. Well, it's just like Chicago, right? And you have the strong mayor, and some of them have gotten in trouble, and some of them have done some bad decision making over the years, and so that must be how everyone is. And I juxtapose that in my own community, where we're the first council manager community in the state of Illinois back in 1914, when we were among, I think, 13. I think we were the 13th in the country to do that. And still to this day, I have people who don't understand what the difference between a professionally managed community is and a strong mayor community. And it's fascinating to me just to juxtapose your experience in Arizona and our colleagues' experiences in Arizona up against what we see here and how we work through that. Um, I think the partnerships that you have established with your city partners are tremendous, and we work very hard. We have some really great MPA programs. NIU obviously is the one that most people know of, but some really strong MPA programs. But we still struggle to build those relationships, or I should say, to keep those relationships strong, because it does feel like it waxes and wanes. There are times where we're in full lockstep, and then there are times in like in an economic downturn where that relationship isn't as strong as it should be. And I guess I'm curious. Obviously, very different experiences, but perhaps even in your time with KU, how do you or have you seen that waxing and waning? And if so, or I should say, if not, what are the things that I should be doing as a city manager, kind of looking at it from the other side to make sure that I am maintaining that relationship and that very close partnership and recognizing that?
Yeah, so I think it is important to acknowledge the structural challenges. And one of the things with having fewer larger cities and counties like we have in Arizona, they're constantly hiring at those entry level positions. People have the chance to have longevity with one city for a long time. So I mentioned Carrie, she was with the city of Mesa for 27 years and had a full career moving up. I think in states like Illinois and in Kansas, folks may move around a little bit more within local government, even within the state, in order to think about a full career and having lots of different opportunities. And that can be a bit of a challenge, because then how do local communities really partner and know that you're going to have those entry level openings? And so, especially when you have kind of economic downturns, it's harder, because some of the first things that we kind of cut are saying we have to take care of the people who are currently employed. We're not going to be adding new people. Now, we're also at a moment where we know in public service, we're about to go through massive retirements, and we have incredible needs at the local level. So I don't think we're going to be in kind of a moment of retraction at the local level for a really long time. Doesn't mean we don't need to prepare for it, but it does mean that I think we're at a growth moment in local government. And it's hard because sometimes there are local governments who think that, oh, we can just pull people from business, without really knowing that you have to re-career. You have to be able to think about things in different ways. It's a different skill set. And that's where I think the partnership with academic units can really come in handy, to be able to say, here are the specific career skills that we're preparing students for that may look different, than kind of a generic administration or generic management that may be coming out of a business school or some other type of organizational leadership. So here's what public administration, what an MPA really prepares you for. As a city manager, I think it really is making sure that you can show, okay, maybe we're not hiring, but here's how a paid internship, here's how a shadowship can work, here's how we get exposure to students, and here's how we can kind of come together. So we do have some smaller communities that we rotate students through, saying, okay, well, you can have a full rotation through the city manager's office in the city of Phoenix or in Chandler, but we may need to think about pairing two smaller cities for a first year and a second year internship so that you can go from Fountain Hills, which doesn't do as many of their services in house, to Goodyear, Glendale, and get very different experiences. So some of it is working on partnerships in local communities to say, we might not be able to host an intern for a full year, but we can work with this village, this special district, and this city to give full exposure to what local government in the state of Illinois looks like.
So I'm glad you mentioned, and over the course of the podcast, we've talked about generations, we've talked about disruption, systems thinking. Like we like to dabble in all sorts of crazy ideas. But when you talked about kind of the gen ed class and democracy, I'm curious, we all had civics. I had many years of civics and didn't know what local government was until I literally stumbled into it in the Phoenix Metro. But as you have these students getting exposure to what I think we all took for granted, what are you hearing from them and the professors about how they think differently about kind of the topic of community, let's call it?
Yeah, so part of it again is just not knowing that you can make a career in this. And I think many of us didn't know that you could make a career in this. So some of it is just exposure to what exactly do these careers look like. I can give you an example of we had someone who came to us really focused on education policy because he said, I didn't get exposure to a lot of civics. I think that we really need to focus on education policy. He's about to finish his MPA and go become a budget analyst. And he's incredibly happy. But if you'd have told him 3 years ago, you're going to go to a budget analyst position, he would have been like, no, I'm not getting an MPA. This isn't the thing. But now he's like, oh, turns out budgets are values documents. How we make decisions in communities flow through the budget. This is a really important skill set, an important way to pour into communities. Again, it's connecting it to what is the impact that they're going to have in their community. And sometimes it's just getting exposure to showing really passionate professionals. That's where I think that we also are really advantaged in the Phoenix metro area. We have so many folks who are willing to pour into our students and throughout the state because we connect them with mentors all over. And then showing this is what it really means to do the work. And for many students in this generation, I think the one thing is that they think that they're going to go in and out of it. And I just have a hunch that I'm going to check in with some of these students in 20 years and they're still going to be in local government and they're going to be really happy. But they have assumptions that they're going to move around a lot more than they will.
So that's funny because I often joke when we talk about it locally. It's often like when you get into local government, it's like stepping into something that never leaves the bottom of your shoe. So it just sort of sticks with you and you sort of stay in it. So, I'm going to say two things. Number one, you said a word I had never heard of, which was shadowship, which I think I just need a little bit more context of what that is because it's intriguing to me. So if you could answer that question, I would appreciate it. The other one is that we call our podcast AuthentiCity FM. We know that you are not just an accomplished academic and practitioner of training the next generation of leaders, but you're also human outside of work. And so can you give us a little bit of insight into who you are, what makes you a kind of a whole person outside of work? So two-part question, but shadowship, I'm so curious about.
Absolutely. So we hear all the time about internships. We tell students to do internships. Internships are incredibly important. Internships are a pretty big commitment for both the student and the organization that's hosting them. And sometimes students just need like a little taste of what is a day in the life of. So a shadowship is exactly that. It's inviting a student to shadow you for a day or two or a half day. We actually put together a really great little one-pager that I'm happy to share via email and you all can post that we share with our advisory board on here's how you prepare for a shadowship. Like, here's how you talk with the student. And it depends on level, right? If you have a graduate student, they already kind of know what they're getting into. They're probably deciding between different departments and what path they want to take. For undergrads, they really may just need to know, like, what is it that city management is? What do you do in local governments? What are all the departments? And so a shadowship is really just saying, we're not asking the student or the organization to make a semester long or even a month long commitment. It's take a day, expose a student, see what it's about, and let someone shadow you for a day. And I think shadowships can help us understand what we're really excited about and also like, oh, maybe that's not for me.
Yeah, and I'll just say I think that's pretty interesting because it's a low barrier to entry for the organization too. So it's a way to dip our toe into the water of maybe it leads to an internship, but it also just promotes the profession. So thank you for giving me some insight into a new term that I can kind of steal and probably borrow in my own organization. So the second part of my question is who are you outside of this work? What do you do for joy? What's your guilty pleasure? Like what can we find you doing when you're not leading the next generation of leaders?
Yeah. So I feel like I used to have a lot of hobbies and now I have a toddler. And so I have the most adorable toddler in the world and he's fantastic. And every Saturday morning we go to swim class and he loves it. So I love being able to do that. When we moved to Arizona, my husband was born and raised in Lawrence, and I also grew up in Kansas. And so we had a really big community that surrounded us that we really loved and poured into. I was a elected county commissioner when I was in Kansas, and so did a lot of civic engagement work. Here, we were really fortunate in that we brought a lot of family with us. So my parents came, his dad and stepmom came, some cousins came, his grandma came. So we still have a lot of community and a lot of family. So we love to host a family brunch. I love to cook. When I was doing my dissertation, I learned that nobody likes to hear about research, and research takes forever. It's never done. But what is done is a great meal that you can share with people. So cooking is a passion of mine because it's pretty instant gratification. And that matters in a time when I spend a lot of my time working on books and articles that take years to really fully form. So toddler swimming, cooking. Um, my toddler will eat pancakes every morning. So just this week, we've had sweet potato pancakes, banana oatmeal pancakes, pancakes with strawberries, pancakes with blueberries. So, the cooking changes depending on the palates, but try to keep things interesting.
So Shannon, I want to pivot just a little bit, and we may come back to some of those things you just talked about. But
Great
uh,
blueberry pancake recipe if you need it.
you know, and I will tell you, I will have pancakes 7 days of the week as well. So you can throw those recipes my way. That sounds excellent, and my girls will be very happy with that as well. Um, your another of the things that you have done and do relates to the National Academy of Public Administration. Corey alluded to the fact that you and I are both being honored next week as champions of government, 250 of us from across the country. The more we talk, the more I realize that you deserve such accolade and I do not. An aspect of something else that's on your resume is that you are a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. A lot of people may not know what NAPA is or why it exists or the work that it does, let alone what a fellow of that organization does. Tell us a little bit about NAPA and your role as a fellow.
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to us both because I love that we're getting to go celebrate this. I love that NAPA and ICMA came together to say, let's really focus in on local government in this 250th anniversary of our democracy. And let's really hold up folks who often don't get a lot of attention. So in some ways, I feel like I'm not deserving because I get to do lots of other things. So I'm excited to be there and to celebrate with everyone. And then very excited the next morning after the celebration, I'm getting to host a small panel with some that NAPA and ICMA are putting together to really say, what does the next 250 years look like? And it'll be a panel of 250 of some of the folks who are being honored as 250 public service champions. So I'm excited for that conversation. Now, National Academy of Public Administration is a congressionally chartered organization that really focuses in on good government. And so, in order to be a NAPA fellow, you have to be elected by the 1,000-person kind of elected membership. NAPA focuses on doing reports that help us with kind of good government and good governance. So some of this, often it used to be directly funded by federal appropriations to help with things like updates to the FAA or different federal agency questions. Um, I think recently the National Academy has really focused in on how do we kind of take a better look at local state government and work across professional associations. So National Academy Fellows are made up of folks with really amazing careers in practice and in academia. So I think it is a space where we can kind of come together across that theory practice divide and say, how do we just focus on good government and what does that look like? I'm really excited about things that NAPA is doing right now because they're in a very collaboration forward space. So there's a relatively new CEO and president, James Christian Blackwood, who's just incredible and making partnerships and making sure that we're kind of having a focus on what does the next generation of public service look like and how do we show up and show up in these spaces to say what does good government mean and how do we contribute to that. So the National Academy focuses on studies. Most of them are kind of contracted through Congress or different federal agencies, state, local governments, professional associations. Some they just do themselves. So I'm on a working group this year to focus on how the executive orders have impacted work around diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the country. And so it's bringing together practitioners and academics to say, okay, these executive orders have really shook things up. What information can we provide for folks? So instead of just saying we don't know, it's saying let's get in there and research it.
Well, I'm very excited for your session next week. You are on the panel with a good friend of mine, Phil Green, who is from just a few towns over here in Illinois, from Hoffman Estates, and it's the opportunity. I agree with you. I'm excited that ICMA and NAPA have pulled these events together and are really kind of merging this group together to really celebrate what local government has been able to accomplish and what it continues to accomplish every day, and particularly what the future looks like. I think we're uniquely positioned to have some insights and at the same time feel a lot like we're guessing still. And I think I don't say that in any way negatively. Actually, I think that's what makes it somewhat exciting, is that the future is somewhat uncharted, perhaps more so than it has been in a long, long time. And so the chance to look to the future will be great. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to actually meeting you in real life, not just across the airwaves.
So, Shannon, one of the things that we are unapologetic about is talking about how local government is sort of the last functioning unit of government in the country. So the federal government is its own brand of crazy. Every state is its own brand of crazy, but there's no partisan way to plow the streets or to make roadways or to flush the toilet. So we're proud practitioners, and so I say that to say, local government is really a central part of democracy and who we are as a people. So this is your opportunity to do sort of a sales pitch. If you are a young person, you're thinking about a career in local government, or you're thinking about wanting to give back and do a little bit more, why should someone choose ASU over all of the other choices that you have? Sort of give us your elevator pitch. Why should they come to you to learn how to do this job a little bit better?
Yeah, so I think there's the obvious in that we are now the number one ranked program in local government, and that really helps. We're also ranked across more specialty areas in the top 20 than any other public institution in the country. And so I think that's also really important. I love local government because you can't get bored in local government. Local government's responsible for a lot of different things. We need folks who can understand how to keep our water safe, how to keep our streets safe, how to build community and have strong neighborhoods, think about parks. There are all kinds of things happening in local government, and we need people to really be able to think in a transdisciplinary way about how do we approach this work. It's also the government that's closest to the people. And so I think you're right when it comes to that trust. Local government is the most trusted because it's closest to the communities that we serve, and that's vitally important. Um, so I think that my sales pitch is that ASU provides a really rigorous and really accessible education. So our goal is to meet people where they're at. We're also really focused on saying there's not just one way to do this work. So our MPA, we're making accessible by ensuring that we have those elections fellowships, Indigenous fellowships, accelerated federal career track, our Marvin Andrews Jane Morris fellowship programs. So we have fellowship programs that help actually fund it. So the Marvin Andrews Jane Morris Fellowship is mind-blowing in the support that you get. Students not only have their full tuition covered, they have a paid internship, they get benefits, and they're in the Arizona retirement system. So they actually start towards their retirement journey while they're students with us, while getting really great mentorship, connections throughout the state. So I think there are lots of really, really wonderful reasons to come to ASU to think about your local government journey. And if you decide that you do want to do other areas, we have that as well, thinking about work with the federal and state government. I do want to push back on one thing that you said, though, and pushback may not be the right word, but I'm going to say something that may be a little controversial in local government spaces still. We don't take a nonpartisan approach at ASU. And I think that for a long time, and speaking of NAPA, we're going to be talking about this with some colleagues. We're going to have a new piece coming out on the NAPA blog that is not behind a paywall. It is fully accessible, so I will share it with everyone when it comes out. We're really pushing and urging for a transition from a nonpartisan framework to a partisan inclusive framework. So I think for a long time, we've argued that our work is nonpartisan. And I think that that does make it hard for folks to trust us because partisanship is often part of our identities and our voting behavior is a part of our personal lives. And if we want to say that we want people to show up authentically and as their whole selves in their workspaces, I think it's unreasonable to say we aren't partisan as part of who we are. Many of us have voting records. I ran for elected office in a partisan position because it was at the county level. Now, partisanship doesn't mean that your behavior isn't inclusive. It doesn't mean that you don't serve all people. It doesn't mean that you only represent a particular part of the community that you serve. But we need to have public service education and a career path that's partisan inclusive. And I think that's how we really ensure that we have long-term viable trust. So when we say partisan inclusive, I mean that I work with my colleagues from across the political spectrum to ensure that we have government that serves all people. That doesn't mean that we compromise our professional values, our ethical values. It means that our public service values are really grounded in effective, efficient, and equitable service for all people. But we don't try to say that that doesn't happen in partisan spaces because our elections are often run by partisan elected serving whole communities. Our counties operate with a number of elected officials that are often from partisan backgrounds. So for many cities, we run nonpartisan elections and we expect everyone to operate in a nonpartisan way. But I think it's also important to say that we can show up as our authentic selves. And some of that is what our political identity is. Showing up as our authentic self doesn't mean we don't serve everyone.
So that is so fascinating and connects to something I was thinking about, so as you talked about NAPA and studying in the next 250 years of democracy, as you pull the School of Public Affairs and the future students who are the future public servants across all of these professions forward, what are the trends you're kind of seeing that, as we've talked about disruption, and I'm fairly bold about it, the systems are broken. And trying to use duct tape and WD-40 to fix a broken system is not the way forward. And the opportunity, and if you look at Neil Howe and William Strauss's work in Generations, we're at the next evolution point anyway. And so I think there's this opportunity to kind of forecast forward into what better actually looks like without kind of dragging the anchor of how it's always been.
Yeah, so if anyone knows anything about ASU, we love to brag about how we're number one in innovation. We put it on buses. It's a big thing. You can't really say ASU without saying innovation. I probably am going to get in trouble for being so far into a conversation without mentioning the word innovation. And I think what's really important is that when we say innovation, it doesn't mean that we're trying to do something completely new and completely different. So I think part of innovation is saying, how do we understand what's happening now? And how do we then work to do it better and do it differently? So it's not being tied to what's happening, but it doesn't mean we don't understand what's happening. So I tell my students all the time, if you really want to be innovative, if you really want to do something differently, you have to truly understand what's happening and where we've been. So I don't think that we get to the future we want in local government without understanding our past in local government and some of the baggage that we're carrying forward to say, oh, this is why we've done things this way, and here's how we can do it differently. So I think in order to be bold and to be innovative and to try to figure out a better way, we have to actually understand how we've been doing it and why. I think one of the best innovations we can have in public service education is actually making sure that we have a strong historical foundation for all of our students.
That puts a lot of pressure on practitioners to actually understand sort of where we've been. So that gives me a little bit of anxiety. So I'm just going to throw that out there authentically. Like that just makes me a little bit nervous. So speaking of anxiety, this is the point of the podcast where we transition to you get to ask a question of your hosts. And I joke this is part of the bit of the podcast is I don't promise a good answer, but I promise an answer. So what's a question that you would have for us, right, who are in this work? And just I arbitrarily I might make Phil go first just because I see him on my screen.
So I really appreciate you all making this space. And I think the important thing for me is that we continue to hear from folks who are doing this work about what surprises you about folks just coming into this profession and what do they need to know that they don't know.
Phil, I'm going to do you a solid, and because I actually I have somebody I have an answer to this question, and so uh, I work for a local government in Minnesota. We just hired our very first sort of local government management fellow, and he is wrapping up his first year, like his year of service. And I will say the thing that surprises me most about young people coming into the profession is how much smarter they are than I was at that age. I am blown away by the things that they walk in and they just instinctively know. And I'm like, that took me 10 years and you already have this. And so I am struck by how much smarter and how much more worldly they are than I was at that age. And so, um, number one, it's a sort of it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel inferior in terms of the work, but it also gives me some hope that they're going to be able to go much further than I was at that point. I think the other thing that sort of is sort of interesting is that, we all have difficult council meetings and so invariably some council member will say something and you'll kind of just pause and wonder, like, I wonder how they got there. And the young people in the profession sort of ask the question broadly. And I'm like, you got to remember, we have thought about this topic for hundreds of hours in many cases. And we give our council members 20 minutes to think about it. And so I provide a little bit of context, like, right, we're local government managed professionals. We think about these things all the time. And it does a disservice to councils to, only get a topic for 20 minutes or right, maybe they get an hour a year to think about something. And so it's a reminder that the democracy that we help lead is inherently messy. And so it's that balance of, right, they are still the representative of the community. And so whatever question they ask is a valid question because obviously somebody has it. And so it's providing a little bit of context around how much effort goes into getting a question right and to thinking about what an answer might be. And then I say that because Colin Vu is our management fellow. He's giving his final presentation to the city council next Monday. He's been a terrific leader in our organization, and so it's I. The question you asked was so timely because I just lived that experience, so I appreciate that. And now I'll say, Phil, I gave you a little bit of time to craft your own answer. I hope that was enough.
That was great work. Yeah.
It could have been longer, Mike, but I appreciate, that brevity is the source of all brownie points, as my village president would say. So, this this youngest of generations coming into the workforce, what continues to impress me about them, in addition to what Mike said, they are brilliant, is that they are curious. And I don't know, I've talked about this on the podcast before. I don't know if I was just shy or I just was unwilling to ask difficult questions of my superiors when I was brand new. But I have found, and not all of them work in my organization, but I have the benefit of engaging with a lot of our young professionals here in Illinois through a variety of different means. I am impressed at their comfort with asking hard questions and expecting you to convince them that what you're saying is correct, right? It's not just, they're not just, oh, okay, that's very nice. It's, well, but why do you think that? And why have we tried it that haven't we tried it that way? And are you sure? And how do you know? And sometimes, because my 10-year-old will say the same thing to me, and I'm like, because I said so, um, is not the appropriate answer in that circumstance. And what it has shown me is that we frequently, as practitioners, take the thing, whatever it is irrelevant, but we take it and we assume in many ways it just is. And they don't assume that it has to be that way or that it is something that we have to continue to own in the same way. They're willing to challenge that perspective. We've all, the three of us, talk about the fact that we're fairly open minded and we're fairly willing to challenge the status quo. Well, that's true up until it's our idea that's the status quo. And now it's, well, are you sure that you should be challenging my idea? Yeah, of course you should be. And I think I just really appreciate that about them. I think what I have tried to help folks understand is also, though, the need that while we should challenge and work toward change, it needs to be thoughtful. And it doesn't mean that needs to be slow, but it does have to consider the outcomes and the ramifications of that change. And I think sometimes it's a little bit like, well, we'll deal with that once we're in it, which is fine, right? And it depends on what we're talking about. But the speed to just kind of say, we're going to change it, it's going to happen, it's going to be fine. And then finding yourself with a whole series of other unexpected challenges that you now have to find a way to put the pieces back together. And so it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It doesn't mean that you slow down too much, but it does mean that you're thoughtful about those steps. And sometimes the right step is not taking a step at all. And sometimes the right step is taking 5 steps at the same time. But recognizing the difference and recognizing to when to slow the throttle. And again, that I don't want to ever take the wind out of anyone's sails. I want them to be excited about it, but I want them to feel the opportunity of success that comes from being taking into account those steps.
So I'll pull a little bit of each of the threads. The first word that came to my mind was eager. This generation is so eager to make change. And because they've grown up in such a change fluid era. I mean, they're internet natives and they can talk to any device and they will all grow up with AI being like we grew up with email. It will be new and novel for a minute and then it will be normal. And to Phil's kind of point, that eagerness without context. And when you're coming into an organization, which is highly hierarchical, and to your point earlier about understanding where you came from, Arizona's governments are fairly new and fairly novel compared to much of the country, who are dealing with collective bargaining contracts that are decades of little tweak here, little tweak there, or civil service legislation that's a century old and makes no sense in 2026, but is still the rule of law. And so when you have all these novel, great ideas and you run into these constant barriers, or in a multi-generational workplace, we joke about it on the podcast. Oh, you're so cute, right? Like you're so eager and so excited, and it hasn't been worn out of you yet, but a few council meetings from now it will. I think managing all of that is the very special nuance of this time. And they are coming in smart and resourced. And that creates an interesting friction in the workplace, because the generation that has all the institutional knowledge, who's very comfortable, is very threatened by that. And we've talked amongst ourselves, both on the podcast and off screen, about how we are moving from a world of org charts where everyone had a box and the box had a structure and everything had a line and you didn't violate those lines, into more of a mesh network matrix structure organization where communities are focused on outcomes, and those don't happen within the silo of one department. And so managing those two generational perspectives as the institution is changing and as the community that it's serving is changing is, I think, one of the most novel things that's probably going to happen in the next 5-ish years.
I really appreciate those answers. I think that's great. Is this where I get to ask another question?
The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, I think part of what you're getting at too is that this moment is a time where we're seeing a lot of change, and for the students that I'm working with, they range in generations, but for our traditional college age students, this political environment, which I think we can all acknowledge is a bit chaotic, is really the only one they've ever known. Many of them kind of had some really formative years during the pandemic. And so the way that they interact with the world is just very different. And I think we're seeing communities respond in really different ways. And so where we're seeing kind of growth, where we're seeing people exiting communities is constantly changing. So how do we, as local government professionals, kind of prepare people across the country? I mean, we have a democracy that's survived for 250 years with a collection of very different types of governments. And so I think going back to the structural piece, how things are structured in Illinois, very different than Arizona, different than New York, different than California. When we say we're preparing people for local government, how do we help them understand that full range? Or do we need to?
So I'll go first so they can think. I think it comes back to the joy of a program like what you have at ASU in the School of Public Affairs. This is my 4th state. I grew up in Wisconsin. I did time in Arizona and Colorado before Iowa. Every state was different. I had to learn from scratch each time. And the ability and willingness to learn something different is actually the most important skill set. Having worked in Goodyear, hyper growth, right? I mean, it was 35,000 when I started, 65,000 when I left, on its way to 600,000. That's a distinct experience. In Colorado, I worked for a city that formed after it was fully developed because it was threatened by commercial annexation by the neighboring town. Special districts, city of 100,000, 50 employees. Completely different form of government. Come to the Midwest, unions, collective bargaining, civil service, all of it. Never experienced that out West. And so I think the important skill set goes back to curiosity and being willing to understand that different systems are just different. It doesn't make them better or worse. And so as we're talking about preparing this next generation, it's the idea that you're going to learn something 7 different ways. And maybe there are some ways that feel better, but there are reasons that those other 6 versions exist too. And at the end of the day, great service to the community that calls this place home is really the only goal.
Oh, that's such a tough thing to follow. Golly. I was gonna say something that is maybe related to things that I've heard through like threaded throughout this episode. And Shannon, you talked a lot about engagement and you've talked a lot about access. And so I will flip that a little bit and say, as a local government leader in my organization, I I have a mindset that I don't know the correct answer of what to do next, but I know and I have a belief that the people who have a lived experience and who are closest to the residents and doing direct service, well, they'll have an insight into something that I won't, and so I have an obligation to number one show and demonstrate respect for that skill and insight that they have, and then empower and engage them in the solutioning because. Um, if you're waiting for me to develop the perfect program, we're all doomed. I'm not going to have the right answer. But if I have the mindset of that the team that we have assembled is smart and capable and knows what the community wants and needs, we're going to be better off. And I think maybe that it's the mindset shift of the local government leader that, okay, I don't have to know everything, but I do have to convene the right people in the solution. I think maybe we have a fighting chance of adapting to that change, but that is a terribly incomplete answer because it's really hard to do well, but I think it's our only hope. Phil, bail me out, please.
No, no, I don't think I need to. I think that was actually more thoughtful than you're going to give yourself credit for. But so I guess when I think about um, what it is that the future is going to require and what it is that new or young people coming into this profession are going to struggle with, it's the fact that it is different everywhere. To Corey's point, like there is, I have worked in 5 communities, all within 20 miles of each other, and I will tell you, each of them had its own unique set of challenges that wouldn't exist in any of the other communities. And it's not just across the 50 states or across the world where you're going to see differences. You're going to experience differences wherever you are, department by department, community by community. And so, what is the grounding factor that takes you towards success? And I think what you have said tonight, Shannon, relative to ASU and this fundamental responsibility to make the community better has to be the driving force behind every professional who is going to step into these roles. Because at the end of the day, it isn't about me. We joke about this, that it's not my town, it's the elected officials community, so they're going to make that is true. And obviously, we don't want to remove the individual and the passion from the work, because you need those things in order to get it done well. But it isn't about yourself in terms of the service that you're providing. It is about making lives better. It is about improving the conditions for the individuals that you serve, and doing everything you can, whether it's learning from scratch like Corey had to, or listening to different perspectives like Mike's talking about. It's not about the individual; it's about the improvement and benefit to the whole. And on in weeks where I am frustrated by the work, or frustrated by the people, whomever the people may be, fill in the blank, I do sometimes have to reflect on what is it that I do and why do I do it? And it can't just be because it's fun for me, because there's a lot of days where it's the opposite of fun. So what is it? It's something bigger, broader. It's the improvement of others' conditions. And so, that's what the next generation is going to continue to have to cultivate, adjust. and bring curiosity to. How can I do this differently? How can I think outside of the box? I got an email today from my chief, my public safety director, talking about regional um, mutual aid structures that we have here in Illinois. And people don't look to Illinois as a kind of the bellwether of great things, but I will say one of the things we do really, really well is mutual aid. We became a model for the rest of the country after 9/11. And the email was that two of our mutual aid networks on both the fire and the police side have seen their federal grants go from 77 million a year to 13. And what do you do when that happens? And basically the email was saying, we're not sure. We need your help to come up with how we're going to keep this thing alive. That's going to be the challenge of local government in the next generation, is to underscore how we can adapt ourselves to the challenges that are in front of us that nobody perhaps anticipated or expected. And it could be climate change, or it could be a different administration in Washington that augments the entire set of expectations that you had. And so that's really exciting, right? It's really fun. It's really hard because it is going to require breaking some stuff, and it is going to require complete rethinking of process or programmatic things that we've relied upon. But what are we here for if not to find those solutions? So I think it's a really exciting time to be in local government.
Absolutely. I think that's why you can't get bored in local government right now. We don't know what's coming next, and we know we're going to have to be the ones to help fix things.
So before we give you the last word and close out this episode, I want to kind of flip the question back on you to ask what local government leaders, city managers, and the institutions they represent can do to best take advantage of this generation that you're training that is about to come into the workforce.
Yeah, I think that one thing that local government managers are really great at is doing amazing work and not needing credit for it. So I think that really good local government just is the behind the scenes, making sure trash is picked up on time, communities are livable, walkable, all the things that we do to make sure that our communities are the best. And we do a terrible job of actually being transparent in what that work is. And so, if I were to ask anything of my practitioner colleagues that would benefit this generation, and I truly believe benefit our communities, it's actually to speak up a little bit more about what the work actually is and what it looks like. Because I think that it's easy for us to dismiss professional management because when it's done really well, we don't even notice it's there. And that makes it hard to find as a career for the people who want to make a big impact. So I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I have more students than ever who want to do public service and who want to have an impact on their communities. And yet most of them come in not knowing that local government management is a real pathway to do that. And it's because really good managers have been really humble for a long time. I'm not saying we all become braggadocious, but I do think that we need to be really transparent in what this work is and why it's so meaningful. So thank you all for doing this podcast. I think that's one step towards that.
I guess that means we can't make fun of Phil for his LinkedIn page anymore.
I mean, you can always still make fun of Phil. That's fine.
Oh, we do. Mercilessly, don't worry. So, Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. I am a proud Sun Devil alum. It's part of the collection of diplomas I've gathered over the years, and still probably some of the most fun years I have had as an adult. As is customary, Mike likes to talk about rituals. Our ritual on the podcast is to let our guests have the final word.
Well, my final word is really just gratitude for you all. Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for continuing to pour into future generations, because I think that's the only way our profession is going to thrive and be ready for what's next. So thanks for the opportunity to come chat with you today. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those of you who will be at ICMA, Local Government Reimagined in Philly next week, make sure you say hello to both Shannon and Phil. And we'll see you again soon.